Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Bava daf Ayin Zayin. We are going to begin on Ayin Vav Amid Beis, the second line from the bottom. So please pay attention, because if you blink, you may miss Amid Aleph in a second. But before we get to the second statement of the Gemara that we began with yesterday's daf, we established that Kol Omid Lizra Kazark Dami, that even though the zrika didn't take place because the blood spilled, but if at the time of the shchita it was a shchita roya, it was a fit shchita, so the din is that it's considered to be ki'ilu, like there was already a zrika, and therefore this person would potentially be chayav dal b'hei if he stole and shechted, and this happened. And we ended up establishing what would be a case of it being fit or not being fit is if you shechted a second before Shkias Achama, which you can't do the avoda of Zrikas Hadam on the Mizbeach after it's dark. So therefore, at the moment you shechted it, it was not Oimed Lizroik. But if you did it early in the day, even if it spills, it was Oimed Lizroik, and therefore it's Kazar Dami. So now we have the second statement. So we mentioned when it came to a person shechs a bal mum, animal with a blemish outside of the azara. So in that situation, even though it was not paida, he wasn't paida it, we still say, because normally the pidya is what matters it, but since it's oimid liftois, it's kabhadei dami. Desani, how do we see this? Reb Shimon Omer, as we continue to Ayin Zayin Bad Aleph, and it would be right to do this Tosfos too, right? Not just to skip over it. But let's see the Gemara. Para metama tumas oichan. So the din is, a para duma has the din of tumas oichan. Now, as we said before, what is tumas oichan? It's only something which at least has a shasa kaisher. At some moment, it was something that could be eaten. However, if it's something which was always, let's say, asur b'hana, and it never had a shasa kaisher, so then it doesn't have the din of oichel. It's not like a food, and therefore it's not matama tumas oichlin. But the paran duma, which of course is quite expensive, nonetheless is matama tumas oichlin. Why? Because it was a shasa kaisher. Says Rashi, u'echol mishenishchata yardu lataras oichel, as it was outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so the din is that it was shechted beheter, right? So the paraduma, as the process of the shchita of the paraduma is done outside of the azar, outside the Beis HaMikdash. Now, in that situation, you're going to be burning it. You're going to be using it to sprinkle on someone who's tummy mace. So how is this a food? Because there was a shasa kaisha. There was a moment in which you technically, even though it's worth billions of dollars because it's so rare, you technically could have just eaten the meat, right? So it has a shasa kaisha. But then eventually, once it's been like designated as the avoda with the continuation of the process of the paraduma, so then of course at that situation it's not eaten, it's burnt, etc. So let's do the entire Amud one more time. Para is matama tumas oichan ha'ava ha'isel shasa kaisher. So since it has a shasa kaisher, therefore it is matama tumas oichan. As we continue to Ayin Zayin Beis. Okay, we did the Amud already. I'm very impressed. The Yomi Reish Lakish, and on this Reish Lakish said, Omer Hayi Rosh Shimon. Rosh Shimon said that para niftis al gavi marachta, that a person can be paida the paraduma even when it's on the marachta, like on the mizbeach. Says Rashi, afil nishchata al hamaracha kemishpat, even if it was shechted properly, yimatza cheres yafi mimena. Let's say you find your lucky day, you find a second paraduma which is nicer than the first. Zer shasa kaisha shala. So that's considered like a shasa kaisha, because you could have always changed your mind and said, you know what, paraduma A is not as nice as paraduma B. So therefore you could always just say, I no longer want this. And therefore you could actually be paid it to make it like chulin, so that you can just use the second one, which is nicer. It says Rashi, "V'alfa be to niftis." Even if you didn't actually redeem it, I feel hachi mishavli uchla. It's still considered to be a food. Hoya uroya liftos, since it's fit to be redeemed. Alma says the Gemara, "Kolim liftos kapadi dami." So Bishom Rav Yochanan Olayim Karesh Rav Shimon Malakish. So we had three answers that we saw in yesterday's daf with regard to the question of why don't we just say Chazur Keren L'Balim? Why don't we say when it comes to Kodshim, especially according to the Shita of Rav Shimon, who holds a Shchita Shina Ruy is not a Shchita. So if you have Kodshim, it's not Ruy. So he says that one answer was Rav Yochanan said you shechted a Tomim Bifnim L'Shem Balim. So therefore, since you did that, you did everything right. But we don't say Chazar Keren L'Balim because the blood spilled. But again, it was still a Shchita Roya because at the time you shechted it was okay. Or Rav Yochanan says, the first one was Rav Dimi said in the name of Rav Yochanan. Here is Ravin said in the name of Rav Yochanan. He shechted a Tamim Bifnim, but it was Shlo L'Shem Bailim. It wasn't for the sake of the owner. And on that, the Gemara in the beginning of Masechtas Zvachim, the first Mishnah actually says that it was shechted something Shlo Shma, it's kosher. And because of that, but you don't give the animal back because it's all l'baal m'shem chayva. And then finally, Reish Lakish said the case of a shechet bali mum b'chutz. So the first two answers is shechting a tomim bifnim, and the second, and Reish Lakish is the opposite. You shechted a bal mum b'chutz. So they're all considered to be a shechita ruya. So says the Gemara, Bishlama. Rav Yochanan Rav Shimon Lakish Taka Boilu Ukmul Masnis in a field but Tamimim. Reish Lakish is the case of a Balmum. And he wants to establish our Mishnah is talking about a Tamim, and certainly the Mum case too. El Reish Lakish my time Rav Yochanan. Why did he mention the case of Balmum? Why does he mention the cases again? The two possibilities of being makar of Tamimim Bifnim. So Reish Lakish would say, the pasuk says, "U'tfachai u'machrei," shechting and selling. So kol hechad isim b'mechira isim b'tvicha. Anytime where we can apply that there is selling, there is shechting. Kol hechad leisim b'mechira leisim b'tvicha. However, when there is no selling, then there is also no zvicha. V'hani kadashim. When it comes to the karbanos, hoyel dechimaz min kadashim, when you sell them, it's not a good sale. You can't sell it. It doesn't belong to you to sell. So therefore, when it comes to kadshim, it's not a sale. Therefore, leisnu b'zvicha. So therefore, the same thing. There's no shchita either. Says Rashi, you're not going to be chayav dal b'heim for shchita if it's kadshim. It's because like you wouldn't be chayav for mechira. Says Rashi, we'll have a mechira. Then kadashim tamimim yotzin l'chulin, because when it comes to kadashim tamimim, if you sell it, it's not chulin, right? If you give it to another person, hilkach bebali muman askinon to isnehu b'tervayu. Therefore, he mentions the case of a bal mum where it is shaykh to say a case that it can be sold. Of course, even though it's not padoi, but it's called oimi liftos is kapadoi dami, and therefore it's like a mechira, and therefore it would be a tvicha. And therefore, that's why he wants to mention, in order to link the selling and the shechita together, that's only shaykh. We're talking about a balmum. V'yazdul tamayu, and they go in accordance to their reasoning, whether or not you need both of them or not. Ditmar hamoicher treifa. A person sells an animal which is a treifa, so it's an animal that has a mortal defect and is going to die. So Ladiri Rav Shimon, according to the sheet of Rav Shimon, who holds that you would be potter if you would shecht it because it's a shchita she'ena ruya, because you can't eat it. It's not a good shchita because it's treifa. So according to him, it's not a shchita. Rav Yochanan Omer Chayiv, Reish Lakish Omer Potter. According to Rav Shimon, he would still say there's a machlokas Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish whether you're Chayiv or Potter. So how do we understand that? So Rav Yochanan Omer Chayiv. Even though it's true, you can't shecht it because he holds again a shchita shinaru is lo shma shchita, but you could sell it, and therefore, even though it's a case where the shchita is nothing, but in the same thing, if you sold the treifa, you could sell a treifa, And if you would sell a treifa, you'd be chayiv dalad v'hei. Reish Lakish Amar Potter, Kiva the Leisa B'Tavicha Leisa B'Machira. So interesting. According to Reish Lakish, if you just not kachim, just stomach, animal which is a treifa, so because it's a shchita shina roya, Lefi Shitas Rav Shimon is not a shchita, so therefore you're not chayiv dalad v'hei for the tvicha, which therefore you're also not going to be chayiv machira. It has to be that the situation has to apply if you would shecht it or sell it. And therefore, that's why Reish Lakish would actually say it'd be potter in that case. Question 6. Matzah the treifa leisa b'tvicha. Matzah the leisa b'machira. So you would maybe say treifa is not by zvicha because you're holding for the shita Rav Shimon, the shchita shena ruya. And you maybe say it's not a machira because we learned utfacha machira kol hecha the leisa b'machira leisa b'tvicha. And that's the answer. Eis Rav Yochanan Rav Shimon ben Lakish. So he has a kasha on Reish Lakish. Gun of kilayim. Let's say a person would steal kilayim, and we're not talking about garments. Says Rashi, mikivsa v'tayish. So then these two animals that were co-breeded, and you stole their offspring. So now the pasuk does say we're going to tvicha seh, as Rashi says, "V'yomer Rabbi Kaman kol makom shneimar seh ein kilayim b'mashma hacham achayim d'israbi behedyu k'nol kamon." So he holds like this: that if you stole again animal which was from forbidden mixture, v'tavcha treifa v'tavcha, and you shecht it, or for that matter treifa, you stole a treifa umachra l'sham tashemar v'chamisha ma'il Rav Shimon. So this is maybe according to Rav Shimon, who holds the tvicha, it's not a good tvicha because the shchita shena ruya. But alma, what do we still see? Afagav the leisa b'tvicha yisa b'machira. Even though maybe this must be like the shita of Rav Shimon, that's why tvicha, it's not a tvicha. Why? Because it's a treifa. So a treifa is a shchita shena ruya. It's not a shchita. So therefore you're not chayav dal v'hei v'tvicha, but it still says you're chayav for the machira. So we see that they're not linked. So it's a kasha in Reish Lakish. So Amalei lo Rabbanon. This is according to the Rabbanon. So therefore, the Rabbanon hold a shchita shena roya is a good shchita, and therefore you be chayav on the machira. The l'chayr should be chayav also on the tvicha. So Rabbanon treifa machira isa b'zvicha leisa. According to the Rabbanon don't require it to be a shchita roya. So what do you mean? Treifa b'machira isa b'zvicha leisa. Right? In fact, we would see that you would actually should be chayav according to them. The Elomai, Rav Shimon, so kilayim b'tvicha isa b'machira leisa. Elatana zvicha v'huadin machira. So ema l'rabbana nami tan machira v'huadin l'tvicha. So in other words, maybe they really are linked, and they only mention one of the cases, but it doesn't mean to exclude it. So therefore, according to the Rabbanan, when it mentions the case by treifa, it says treifa umachra, so it doesn't mean dafka if it was sold, but the truth is even if it would be shechted, you would be chayiv, because that's what the Rabbanan hold, and also umachra, you would also be chayiv to pay, and therefore their taka are linked. Therefore you can establish it like the shita of like the Rabbanan. There was not a kasha on Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chaimai. 1 second. If you want to tell me this is all the shita of Rav Shimon, who holds shchita shena roya is not a shchita, and therefore by a treifa, if you shecht it, you're not going to be chayav dal b'hei. I did the tana treifa b'chada, tana kilayim b'chada. That's why it must mention treifa one case, because only mechira would you be chayav, but not shchita, because the shchita shena roya. So therefore he mentions kilayim, the same thing b'chada, the other way around. That you're chayiv for shechting. Just include everything. Just say Ganav kilayim v'treifa tavchun umachon misham tashmir b'chamisha. Now that would make more sense. That it would just be all inclusive. Now the fact that it doesn't say it in that way is a pretty clear indicator that it's not true. It's not the fact that it mentions one that we're going to include the other one. No, it's probably dafka. Therefore, it makes more sense. Rabbi Yochanan holds like the shita of Rav Shimon. Therefore, kasha, the taka is a good kasha. Now, kilayim, we said that there's possibly a din of Chiyav of Dal Dehay when it comes to Kilayim. That's what it says over here. That if you stole Kilayim and you shecht it, or for that matter, you stole a treifa and you sold it, you have to pay Dal Dehay. Why would you be chayav to pay Dal Dehay by shechting Kilayim? Seksiv. The pasuk says Dafka Seh. Yomarava Zeb Banya Av Kol Makam Shnemer Seh Inu Elo Haitzias Kilayim. It's come to exclude Kilayim. So how can you tell me in this brisa that you're chayiv Dal Dehay for shechting Kilayim? Even though it's true, elsewhere when you find the word seh, it's coming to exclude kilayim. Here, since the word o is actually to include it, and therefore kilayim you would be chayiv dal dehay for shechting. So, for Gemara, b'chol o l'rabosu. Whenever I have the word o, is that coming to include something? Is that really true? Is that the case? V'osanya shor or kesev, it mentions specific animals, and that's promptly kilayim, excluding kilayim. For what Rashi says, the puzzle a carbon, that kilayim cannot be brought as a carbon. It has to be an absolute animal like a shor or a kesev, not a mixed mixture. O's is promptly nidme. Nidme is also something which is something mixed. Says Rashi, the enu daimil aviv or imo. It doesn't look like the father or mother. Shabo ma'ayil v'rachel v'daimil a's. It doesn't look like either of the mother or the father animal. Those animals cannot be brought as a carbon. Zakasha, what's the question? We see that the word sho o kesev, the word o in this context is to exclude kilayim, to say that you cannot cannot be used as a carbon. So how could we say that o in the context of dalad dehay that kilayim they're going to be chayiv in kilayim? So Omer Rava hacham in yada dekra v'hacham in yada dekra. You actually need to look at the actual language of the psukim. Hacha gabi geneva. When it comes to stealing, dichsev shor oseh, it mentions these specific animals, an ox or a sheep. Chiati yachol haitzi kilayim mibinehem. So you cannot exclude kilayim from them. Oz l'rabos kilayim. Therefore, O comes to include, and therefore you'll be chayiv for shechting kilayim. So let's look at Rashi. The behema gasa yoledis latisha v'dak l'chamisha. We know that a large animal, it gives birth after its gestation is 9 months, and a small animal is 5. Hilkoch o l'riboy asav lo haitzi. Because we're dealing with two different types of animals, a shor and a seh, the word o must be coming to include. Double lav hachi lo asi kilayim b'mashma'os dekra. So you can't mix, basically you can't make a mixed breed between a shor and a seh. That's what it's telling you, because the gestation periods are completely different. So if a shor would breed with a seh, you're not going to have an animal. It doesn't work. So the word o is coming to include. Since without o, we would never think to include kilayim. So O includes. You wouldn't think to include kilayim. Very interesting. Because a shor and a seh cannot become kilayim. So therefore, when it says shor or seh, it can't be talking about just shor and seh. You cannot think to include kilayim. But now that it says the word O, it's coming to include. Okay. Gabi kadashim dichsev kesev a's. When it comes to these animals, which have similar gestation periods, Shati Yachol Haitzikila Minayim, a kesev could breed with an a's and produce offspring. Therefore, since it already maybe is inclusive, therefore the extra word o is lamayetu. It will therefore come to exclude as we continue to ayin chesem and alf. Gabi kadashim nami never show kesev. Also, when it comes to kachim, it also says the word o. She'enat Yachol Haitzikila Minayim unarabe. And over there, when it comes to Kanshim, even though a shor again cannot be with a kesev, they cannot breed to have offspring. Nonetheless, we say that over there the word o is to include. So Gemara says midaseifa lamayit reisha nam lamayit. No, the reason is since the seifa you could have this mixture between the kivsa and the tayish, so therefore this is also coming to exclude. Adarabba midareishal rabos seifa nam rabos. Maybe the Reish includes, the Seif also includes. So, hi mai. Iyam Rabbi Shlomo Mayit who the Itzrach Trei Miyute. That's why you need two psukim. Diafagav the miyat kilayim, even though we excluded kilayim, israch lamuti nidme. We also need another exclusion for the nidme, the mixture. El iamer rabos, if it's come to include trey riboy lama, why need two? Because hashti kilayim irabile, if we're including kilayim for a carbon, so nidma miboy, so then certainly nidma should be allowed. Okay, so therefore, the fact that you have two potential drushes, it must be that it's coming lamayit, it's coming to exclude. Okay, so again, the case of a nidma is it appears like another animal as it doesn't look like an ox, and so it's nidma. It has this appearance. Okay, we're going to stop there, and let's possibly see a question. Question TA5. Where does this fall? Where does he say that? Okay, so leisa b'mechira, leisa b'tficha is l'inyan kadashim. V'leisa b'tficha, leisa b'mechira l'inyan treifa. So again, according to Rav Shimon, we're saying if we're dealing with a case of treifa, right? It says by the case of treifa, umachra, then you pay dalad dehay, right? So, which we said, because that's like Rav Shimon, that holds that you are not going to be chayav to pay for shechting. But you could still be chayav for the mechira. On this, he says, no, it can't be. If there's no, if you can't do zvicha, you can't do shchita either. So that's TA5. So, if leisa betficha, leisa b'mechira, if you can't do shchita because the shchita shena ruya, right? So therefore, the din is there's not going to be mechira. It's not going to be, there won't be a mechira. However, the other way around, if let's say you can't do a mechira, you can't sell, that there's no tficha, that's regarding kachim. Because as we said, according to him, you can't sell something which belongs to kachim. Something which is kachim is lo havi mechira. And since there's no mechira, so there's not going to be a tficha either. You're not going to be chayav for shechting it either. Okay, that was TA5. TB 6. Ma din treifel in tficha mechira ma stadim b'zeh. Okay, so let's see what I wrote. Im omer shezeh shchita, like it's a shchita roya. Im omer shezeh shchita she'ena roya lo shma shchita, like Rav Shimon, v'samchinan tvicha mechira. We make a connection. Efshel omer she'im ein tvicha gam ein mechira. Aval acherim oimrim sheish mechira afilu im ein tvicha. I think that's a pretty good answer. Okay. It was TB6. Okay, good. And lastly, let's see maybe one or two of Rabbi Gibber's questions. Fear of Shimon, Matai Matami Noiser Mishum Tumas Oichlin. We saw that in yesterday's daf. When it's fit for Zrika, there's time of the day. Be'ez be'ez devarim nechlu Rav Yochanan Rav Shimon iyamrin and kohecha the leisa b'mechira leisa b'tficha v'olecha the leisa b'tficha leisa b'mechira. So I wrote treifa and kachim. That's correct. He'im chayiv dal v'hei b'shvil tficha mechira dekilayim. If you shecht kilayim, yes, you're chayiv. Question 18. Ha'im yesh lo havi carbon min a kilayim. Can you bring a carbon from kilayim? We said no. So that's a miyut. Ha'im yochel liftais peter chamor b'kilayim. We didn't see that yet. Adka.